Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is a Ukraine War news update, the hits and losses for the 15th of January 2026. Sorry I'm a little bit late. Some work being done on the house that meant that I'm somewhat behind schedule. And I'm going to be talking to you today about we're going to be discussing casualty stats, the UK bringing out some stats that agree with the Ukrainians broadly. We're going to be looking at an Iranian ship that has sunk, some other FP2 drone strikes. We have typical overnight strikes across both Ukraine and Russia, and then other bits and pieces to discuss as well. So before we get into it, please remember to like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate those of you who have subscribed to the channel, and it helps keep you in the loop. So it's good for you to be able to find out what's going on in Ukraine and beyond. Right, let's get to the details. Start with the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. Some pretty significant figures in these stats again today. We have a new link to Dell's stats. I tried to access them yesterday and the link was broken, but it is now working again. So we can look at some of the averages and whatnot. 1,150 personnel lost is a high number in that category. 7 tanks is pretty useful too. 2 armored combat vehicles is typically low. 84 artillery systems is very high. 8 multiple launch rocket systems is, that's the highest I remember seeing. We'll see if that's a record. 2 air defense systems is good. 187 vehicles and fuel tanks is insane. All I can say from just the stats over the last 2 or 3 days is if the Russians weren't suffering previously with a lack of equipment, surely they've got to be in trouble going forward. Is this a sign that the Ukrainian drone line really is operating in a way that it needs to, that Magyar's birds, that the unmanned systems forces are really coming into their own? It's got to be, it's important to note that drones from the Russian side have increased significantly over the last couple of days. 929 intercepted drones. That's not just going to be one-way attack drones, reconnaissance drones, also your smaller one-way attack drones like your Lancets and whatnot. So really significant. Right, let's look at some of these figures then. And my goodness, we have some crazy numbers. So we're going to look at artillery. That's gone up significantly. I'm going to move my face to the side here. And you can see that the trend line's been going down with artillery, a bit of a patch here where not as much was hit, but then we're starting to see high numbers again. There's an orange bar that goes all the way up here on the right for today and yesterday. Really, really high numbers there. Multiple launch rocket systems. You can see actually not a bad period at the moment. Very hard. There's 10, looks like it's the highest there. 2 days we've had 10 lost. So 8 though is really decent in terms of losses there. I just want to show you the drones, intercepted drone numbers, and whether they've gone up, and actually look at this precipitous rise. So this is really important as far as I'm concerned. The Russians have ramped up using drones, I think, throughout the daytime. Significant drones, large, you know, Shaheds and similar. They are, you know, using them to a much greater degree. Today is indeed, I think, a record. We're going to see the actual raw data now in the over here. So let's see if we are in the right place. I need to move this a tad to the left. Right, okay, so the yellow indicates a record day. We have a record 7-day rolling average, a 30-day rolling average, and a record daily high for drones. If you just look at what's been going on, and I wonder whether this is a change in how the Ukrainian General Staff have been compiling their drone stats, because we'll look at this. You've got 929, 1074, 933, 353, 654, 653, 687, 225, 406, 879, 704, 278. So many days of really significant numbers. If I then go back to I don't know, let's just go back into November, into October, we've got numbers between 200 and 600, but even those, you know, numbers above 200 are fairly frequent. I mean, you're talking 2s and 300s every single day. But I wonder if we go right back then. So we're now going into December 2024, and drones are, look, 40, 50, 55, 44, 74, 63, 28, 14, 25, 31, 12, 50, 69, 49, 107. So the difference, what a difference a year makes. You're going from in the 50s, in the 40s, in the 30s, in the 20s to in the thousands. That is a huge increase. So we're now into June, and we've got 100s to 200s with a number of days below 100, but generally you're starting to see it regularly creep up. Then you're into the 300s in September, up to the 400s. Then we've got 400s and some 600s now in October. Then into November and December. Here at the end of November, you've got 700s, and let's see, then we're up to 1,000 on the 24th of December. So that's a symbolic day, isn't it? Christmas Eve, 600 the next day, 537. So then I just think that this is a significant challenge for the Ukrainians. But I also think that they're including more drones in this that they perhaps weren't previously, like Molniya drones, and they are producing tons of Molniya drones. So I'm wondering whether the lion's share of these drone numbers come from the daytime drones and the cheaper attack drones that they use, such as the Lancets and particularly the Molniyas. But anyway, that is translating into record 30-day, 7-day rolling average highs, and a daily record high there as well. We've also got, high numbers, obviously, in other categories for the day. So we have a very high number for artillery. We have a high number for personnel, and actually multiple launch rocket system too, really high there. And vehicles and fuel tanks. So yesterday I was wondering what the record for vehicles and fuel tanks is. Actually 312, which is a very, very high number. Yesterday we had 232, but I don't think we've had, I think that's 312 was probably a one-off. And I think 232 yesterday was probably one of the highest numbers on record, in all honesty. Right, so that's that. So that's looked at a couple of the stats. A really good day for the Ukrainians, and I think days like this must really hurt the Russians on the front lines. Pierre was saying to me this morning, he said, he's got a really good handle of what's going on, spends a lot of time out there, spends a lot of time looking at stats and whatnot. Ukraine's only hope for ever stopping Russia is still on the front lines. Although I would qualify that by hitting them with drones, not by frontline troop activity. I think they need to swap out troops for FPV drones, bomber drones, Baba Yaga drones, FP2 near-rear drones, FP1 long-distance drones, and then all your different types of missiles and hybrid weapons like hybrid drone missiles. Right, so now Russia, according to the British intelligence, UK intelligence, has likely sustained 415,000 casualties in 2025, making it the second deadliest year on record. And actually, they bring out a graph to show this. This lighter blue line here, if I can just expand the size of that somewhat for you. So the lighter blue line denotes what took place this last year, 2025. The medium blue line just above it is 2024. So 2024 at the beginning of the year was not as bad as 2025, but then after May, it was really bad for the Russians, and that went through right to the end of the year and then carried it on into 2025, and 2025 came down. But then we've seen it just ticking back up over the last 3 months in the thousands, and that makes it the second worst year of the war, but really significant casualties. Let's see what they have to say about it. The text reads, Russia likely sustained approximately 415,000 casualties. Likely is defense analysis or intelligence analysis modal language for likely is that between 55%, and British is that 75%? I think the British is 75, Americans 85, but it might be the other way around actually. Anyway, 55 to 85%, let's say, likelihood of there being 415,000 casualties killed and wounded for the Russians in the conflict in 2025, second highest yearly total since the war began. This is a slight decrease from the approximately 430,000 casualties Russia sustained in 2024, which was the highest yearly total. Russia's likely sustained approximately 1.213 million casualties, which is effectively almost exactly what the Ukrainians say, right? So it looks like the British are on board with what the Ukrainian general staff is saying, and we've seen similar from other intelligence agencies as well. The average daily Russian casualty rate during December was 1,130, according to Ukrainian general staff, an increase of 1,030 in November 2025. So they're happy to basically regurgitate what the Ukrainian general staff are saying. So they have a confidence that the Ukrainian general staff are accurate with their claims. So fourth consecutive monthly increase, and Russia's average daily casualty rates from August to December were the 5 lowest monthly average dates reported since April 2024. So it'd gone down to a low, kind of 2-year low, and then went up over the last 4 months. Russia's monthly casualty rate has risen again in conjunction with increasing advances across the front line. Russia will highly likely continue to experience high casualty rates over January 2026 with the continued dismounted infantry attacks on multiple axes. So the UK here saying, look, as long as they are going to attack in person with personnel without armored vehicles to protect them, they're going to experience high casualty rates. And just to kind of confirm that idea, Khartiya Brigade destroyed about 70 Russian occupiers, repelling a Russian assault in the Kharkiv region, where it looks like most of these guys are walking just across the ground. They're not using armored vehicles. Just 70 Russian occupiers getting taken out in this video shows that the Russians are still taking really high casualties, and they are using tactics that aren't really going to protect their troops maximally. Now, Russian drone crews, according to Euromaidan Press, are being hunted down in Pokrovsk and Myrnovrad, where urban fighting is underway. Over one day, 39 drone teams were eliminated and 45 drones destroyed. Just let me repeat that. If this is true, wow. So over one day, and you can bet your bottom dollar Robert Profty is going to be like maximal points at the moment for hitting drone teams. We need to take out the Russian ability to take us out. And that's, yes, we'll take out their infantry, of course we will, but we need to focus on their drone teams. These guys are bastards and we need to take them out. 39 drone teams eliminated in just over one day, and 45 drones destroyed. The Ukrainian military says the defenders repelled 57 Russian attacks. 365 personnel lost, including 66 killed in the Pokrovsk sector. Ukrainian troops continue to hold northern Pokrovsk and most of Myrnovrad. These cities remain key objectives in Russia's effort to seize the rest of Donetsk Oblast. So the Ukrainians really putting up a good fight there in the Pokrovsk sector. We hear that the nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia, just on the Zaporizhia in Enerhodar, on the Zaporizhia reservoir as it was, there is evidence that they are storing lots of military equipment there. This is the same as it ever has been. And it not only doesn't surprise me, but it's what I would do if I was in a Russian position. There is a reason why they're keeping a lot of equipment under the territorial protection of the nuclear power plant, because the Ukrainians are clearly not going to strike there. So, of course, they're going to keep a lot of equipment there. At the end of the video, the parking and storage locations of the Russian occupiers' vehicles, which were discovered by aerial reconnaissance, are schematically indicated. So lots of equipment there at the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. As we saw from this video, they've dotted all the pieces of equipment. I don't know if they will have enough guts to try and hit them with FPV drones. I don't think you'll end up causing a nuclear fallout if you strike equipment, particularly further out. But I don't know. It's possibly a little bit too dodgy. Maybe they've got them under cooling pipes and things like that. Now, the Russians are still using horses. Like they are just using horses more than you would probably think. First Separate Assault Regiment of Ukraine repelled another Russian cavalry attack and captured abandoned Russian horses. They've also been saying, look, we're trying hard not to kill the horses, so on and so forth. So there is that, but just quite incredible that the Russians literally are doing sort of cavalry attacks, and they are using horses to the degree that they are. Now, Ukrainian drone forces have disrupted a planned Russian assault in the Donetsk sector. Troops on the 414th Separate Drone Brigade, Magyar's Birds, struck tanks and armored vehicles, halting the attack. Despite Russian efforts to shield equipment with extra armor and concealment, they have been, I mean, wow, look at these kind of turtle tanks that have all of this protection on them, but they don't seem to stop them, stop the Ukrainians from immobilizing them and eventually taking them out. It'd be interesting to know how many drones on average are required to take out these turtle tanks, because I'm fairly sure, well, we saw one that had 25 drones attacking it before it eventually properly succumbed to the Ukrainian attention. But yeah, good to see that there are repelling attacks still along the front line. Tim White said, I pointed out earlier in his thread how unusual it was to see 5 air defense systems destroyed at once. So this is in a different video. And now we have a video of strikes on 6 lots of Russian equipment in one video put together by Magyar of Magyar's Birds. All 6 systems were attacked within 48 hours. So this wasn't taking ones that have been destroyed recently and putting them all together in a montage. So you're double counting them. These were over 48 hours recently, and it over the last couple of days. This video came out yesterday, so the 2 prior days, and it also explains what all the explosions were in occupied parts of Ukraine this week. So this video shows you the destruction of supposedly a Tor surface-to-air missile system, a 50 N6E radar of the S-350 Vityaz SAM system, which I think I've already showed you that one. But then again, they might have taken out 2 of them. I don't know. The Book SAM system, Book M1 SAM system, the Strela 10 SAM system, a Tor M2 system. So you got, 1 minute 43 of the Ukrainians doing what they do particularly well, taking out these near rear targets that are really, valuable for the Russians, both in terms of costing a lot of money, but also functional value into providing air defense for the Russians and target acquisition through their radars, so on and so forth. So Ukraine is doing another really good job with attriting Russian air defenses. And I think you're seeing a move up from Crimea, I've said this previously, to Zaporizhia and Donetsk and the occupied territories north of Crimea, where they've done a really good job attriting Russian air defenses and radars in Crimea, and they've probably largely run out of targets. And so they're now moving up to other areas to do the same kind of activity. Although this does look like a different group, this isn't the Primary group that we're so used to seeing in Crimea. We have seen Primary active elsewhere as well. Anyway, you can go and watch that at your own leisure, the full 1 minute 43 of 6 really valuable pieces of kit being taken out. We've still got Hammer, AASM Hammer guided glide bombs being released by the Ukrainians onto Russian targets here. Ukrainian aviation struck a Russian base in Belgorod region, so they still get close enough to the border to be able to drop these bombs and take out large, significant targets in the Russian territories there. Now, we hear yesterday that an Iranian cargo ship, the Rona, which was sailing on a route used to transport weapons from Iran to Russia, is sinking. That has sunk in the Caspian Sea by all accounts from October 2024 to December 2025. The dry cargo ship visited the ports of Astrakhan, Makhachkala, and Azov more than 20 times, each time departing from Iranian ports. So we have clearly, I think, an Iranian weapons transport from Iran to Russia sinking, and one would assume it's been hit by the Ukrainians, but there's no news of that. Reported as a first photo here of the Iranian vessel Rona, whose crew was rescued by Turkmen authorities in the Caspian Sea. It's still unclear why it was sinking, but that's good news for the Ukrainians. Here we understand where it sank. The authorities of Turkmenistan report that the Iranian bulk carrier sunk in the Caspian Sea. 14 crew members were rescued. The ship came from Iran and was on course to the port of Astrakhan on the northern Caspian coastline up in Russia. So, yeah, it was in the past, the ship was used for weapons transfers from Iran to Russia, which was possibly loaded again with such. So, good news there. And we also hear about so the Shadow Fleet. There were 4 Russian Shadow Fleet tankers, or Greek-owned Shadow Fleet tankers, that were hit yesterday, or was it 2 days ago now? I don't know. 2 days ago, I think, in the Black Sea, and no one's come out and admitted it was them that did it. Normally, the Ukrainians would use unmanned surface vehicles to do that. These were drones, I think, just aerial drones. And I was wondering at the time whether it's a false flag operation, because these are Kazakhstani. They were going to be transporting Kazakh oil from the CPC, Caspian Petroleum Consortium. And since the Ukrainians haven't really admitted it, and they look to be fairly ineffective drone strikes. So there was a drone strike on a kind of top corner of the hull at the top, which is, I don't know, if you're going to hit it with a UAV, you'd hit the bridge, you would try and take out the tanker's ability to, function in the way in which it's supposed to. But this kind of ineffectively bounced off or exploded on the corner on the top hull, which really is not going to do any damage to the tanker. And if that's the same for all 4 tankers, I do, and this is only my speculation, but I do wonder whether that was a case of false flag operations to get the Kazakhs really pissed off with the Ukrainians, so that they complain for the Ukrainians to stop doing that. Now, we have had an appeal from the Kazakhs to, I think, the EU and Turkey to help them, to not have their hydrocarbons get halted in their shipment to the wider world. So watch this space, see what happens there. I wonder if my prediction comes true or not. Anyway, Russia uses GPS spoofing to hide the movements of its shadow fleet, according to Plechenchuk, the spokesperson for the Ukrainian Navy. The Russians first tested the GPS spoofing in the Black Sea. They pursued several goals. Firstly, to confuse Ukraine, and second, to protect tankers and their captains from punishment for transporting sanctioned oil. So there is that. Now, explosion has occurred in the building of the Ministry of Internal Affairs in the Russian city of Syktyvkar. The incident occurred in the vocational training center of the Ministry of Internal Affairs for the Republic of Komi on Mendeleev Street. There are casualties. More than 100 people have been evacuated. So it looks like some kind of sabotage taking place there inside Russia. Again, that's the sort of thing we want to see from a Ukrainian point of view. Last night, 82 drones were sent into Ukraine from Russia. Overnight, 61 of them were intercepted by electronic warfare or were shot down. That equates to a 74% interception rate, which is not good. But then when you have fewer drones, so last night, 82, 61 taken out, that's 21 getting through. Still, a challenge for the Ukrainians. 21 drones hitting 13 places, falling drone fragments causing damage in a further 3 locations. You also had another infographic released yesterday, as there was another wave during the daytime yesterday where Ukraine was attacked by jet drones. 10 jet drones, I think, were sent. I think they're all repelled. So all 10 were shot down or taken down. But I'm not 100% sure of that. There is some imagery coming out. So Ukraine was attacked by jet drones this afternoon, said Tim White yesterday, but air defense repelled the Russian wave on this occasion. And there you get some, looks like Shaheds flying or falling, not flying, getting taken out by air defense. So that looks like that was taken. Was that an interceptor drone or some kind of rocket? Not sure. So yeah, it was attacked by 10 jet drones. Now, we also hear that, I mean, these are unconfirmed stories, but we've heard so many different accounts of Russian Shaheds being adapted. You've got R-60, R-73, so air-to-air missiles and whatnot. You've had claims of different mines being dropped. Now there are unconfirmed stories of another type of mine being dropped, with some sites reporting that Russian drones dropped magnetic mines on the major rail route west out of Kyiv towards Kovel. They are invisible under the snow because they'll fall under the snow. You can't see they're there, and then the train will go over, and metal will be detected by these mines, and they will trigger and detonate. So they could detonate any day now, at least the story claims. So another worry for the Ukrainians there in how the Russians are using their drones. Russia's real drone threat for Ukraine isn't mounting man pads, like I mentioned, those missiles on the Shaheds, but achieving stable communications, enabling real-time FPV control of drones, says Euromaidan Press. If successful, Shaheds would transform into guided weapons with high operational flexibility. We've seen the Ukrainians use their FP1s and FP2s just like glorified FPV drones, and the Russians seem to be able to do that with some of their drones. We saw in, or was it Odessa? No, I think it wasn't. I think it was in Dnipro recently when they hit some sunflower oil storage, and they were using that really clear daytime camera footage coming from that drone that obviously made it easy to steer and control, and they slammed into that sunflower oil tank with a glorified FPV drone. And the Russians are able to do that to some degree, but here they're saying, the Euromaidan Press saying that, look, the real worry at the moment is if they can piggyback on Ukrainian internet networks or whatever, then you have a real problem, because you have hundreds and hundreds of glorified FPV drones being operated every night. Many buildings in Kyiv are experiencing large-scale pipe bursts. Water is pouring down the floors and flooding the entrances. Emergency services are overwhelmed due to a lack of personnel. It is horrific for the Ukrainians. The Russians have had success with striking with their drones and missiles recently. The energy infrastructure is hammered. It has been hammered, and it is in trouble. You have residential neighborhoods in such a spot of bother. Like, either they have no water or electricity, or they have too much water and pipes have burst, and we've seen this with Russian buildings previously, although that's more to do with a lack of maintenance. This is to do with direct strikes and whatnot, and the impact on the energy infrastructure. 14 gigawatts versus 17 gigawatts. Ukraine's winter power gap is forcing industrial shutdowns. So it's not just making it more difficult to live and exist in comfort, but actually it's stopping commerce, stopping industry, which then stops the building of weapons to help Ukrainians on the front line and helps Ukraine to win or prevail in this war. It's a 3 gigawatt shortfall means rolling outages, and as strikes hit substations, the damage cascades through mills and mines and exporters. It is really, really challenging at the moment. I mean, I've been telling you this over the last few weeks. Honestly, watch this space with regard to the Russian strikes. The energy infrastructure is not coping in Ukraine at the moment, to the point where Zelensky has now declared a state of emergency in the energy sector, with particular attention on Kyiv. This is a baptism of fire for Denis Shmyhal, who's moved from being the prime minister to being the defense minister, and there's now the energy minister. I was reading Tim White saying, because all the movements have now gone through, he was saying that, this is a demotion to the energy minister from defense minister. I'm not sure that it is, actually. I think the defense ministry is almost somewhat contingent upon the energy ministry. Like, nothing works in Ukraine without energy. I would argue that this is one of the single most important roles in Ukraine. They need energy. They need energy to build weapons. They need energy to have exports and products, and just to be able to live. So Denis Shmyhal has his work cut out for him big time. So anyway, there's now a state of emergency in the energy sector, with particular attention to Kyiv, which is reeling from Russian attacks that have left residents without power, says the Kyiv Independent. Without power, without heating, water, and it's all in sub-zero temperatures. So I have to remind you as well that the weather is obviously bad. It's actually really bad. So it's negative 13 degrees Celsius, minus 13 degrees Celsius today. And I think it's really cold for the next 2 weeks. What a time to have your energy infrastructure absolutely hammered. Now, last night, in terms of the attack into Ukraine, a morning drone or very early morning drone hit a 15-story building in a Solomiansky district of Kyiv. No injuries reported, but continued strikes hitting these residential buildings. The Russian drone hit the mechanical floor of the building. A wall with an area of about 4 square meters was destroyed, with no further burning. Luckily, rescuers are working to open the door of one of the apartments on the 15th floor and inspect the technical floors where technical equipment is found. I don't know what all that means. Then we have Bilapili and Sumy region being struck. There's a person killed there, 4 injured. Man died in an airstrike. He was 35 years old. Victims were all hit by shrapnel, and 2 large blasts out on the outskirts of Dnipro. Smoke is seen rising from the impact there. So there were some significant hits overnight. And then we move on to, that's the explosion at the office in Komi. Officials said device detonated at a training center. Building work has been carried out at the time, which may be linked. 10 people have been injured, 200 were evacuated. And a ballistic missile has hit Odessa region. That's just in the last few minutes by the looks of it. Looks to have struck the port of Chornomorsk. Now, the Ukrainians last night, there was an explosion and a blackout in Orsk in Russia. So the Ukrainians trying to hit the Russian energy infrastructure likewise. There was also another strike at Nevenomysk Azot. So this is a chemical plant that's been hit previously. This looks fairly substantial. Pretty decent hit there by the Ukrainians. And you can see from this video that something is on fire there. Tim White says Ukraine's drone forces have probably hit a chemical plant in Russia. The Azot factory, Nevenomysk Azot in Stavropol territory. It's been hit on different occasions. So I think, not for the first time that's been taken out. So here the Kazakhstanis sort of complaining. Kazakhstan on Wednesday urged the US and Europe to secure, I said the EU and Turkey, it's actually US and Europe, to secure the transport of oil following drone attacks on tankers heading to the Black Sea terminal on the Russian coast, which handles 1% of global supply. So this is an important hydrocarbons hub. Unidentified drones struck at least 2 oil tankers on the Black Sea, so unidentified drones still, on Tuesday, including one chartered by the US oil major as they sailed toward a terminal on the Russian coast to load oil from Kazakhstan. I wonder if we'll find out who did what there. Right, moving on to other bits and pieces. Because of the Pokrovsk and Halayaplay directions and the actual disasters they have been, I mean, Halayaplay has been somewhat successful for Russia, but they've stalled there. They are taking heavy losses, and the Russians are taking really bad losses in Pokrovsk and Leningrad area and Dobropilia north, of course. Now, because of that, in Russia, Lieutenant General Sukhrab Akhmedov has been removed from his post as Deputy Commander-in-Chief of the Navy for Coastal and Ground Forces. So that will include Marines and the use of those units. The reason for the removal was the incompetent management of subordinate units. And as a result, the huge losses suffered by the 155th Marine Brigade. I mean, they've been hammered everywhere they've gone. Down in Vuhledar, they were hammered multiple times, continually reconstituted. Then they were sent up to Kursk. They got hammered up there, and then they'd been sent down to the Eastern Front, where they'd been subsequently hammered again. And a 40th near Halayaplay, I know less about them. On May the 24th, Akhmedov was removed from command of the 20th Army for colossal losses. The most high-profile episode was the attack on personnel near Kreminna, when the occupiers stood for hours waiting for the general's speech, becoming an easy target for HIMARS. Now, this is honestly a very good sign for Ukraine. If they are getting rid of one of their commanders in charge of these units in the areas where Russia are having the most success, kind of thing, then that shows that they're not really having the success that they are letting on. That is an excellent sign for Ukraine. It really, really is. Now, Alexander Bornyakov, I told you that people have been moved to different positions in this government reshuffle. One of them, obviously, with Mikhail Fedorov moving from the Ministry of Digital Transformation to the Defense Ministry, where he's now Defense Minister, that leaves a hole in the Ministry for Digital Transformation. So his deputy, Alexander Bornyakov, has taken over there. Now, that's an important position, transforming the nation digitally to meet the new future. is super important, but also there's a lot to be said for the work done in the context of drones there, by that ministry. Now, because of the issues being felt in Kyiv at the moment, or exacerbated, should I say, by these energy issues, there's this spat developing between Zelensky and the mayor of Kyiv, Klitschko, Vitaly Klitschko, the former boxer. Now, Klitschko and Zelensky famously don't get on, but it seems to have come to a head, should we say, as Klitschko has been very public, airing his washing in public. So, wow, says Tim White, the mayor of Kyiv reveals not once has Zelensky tried to meet with him since becoming president. It follows Zelensky's repetition of in his evening's address of what Energy Minister Denis Shmyhal said earlier in what is now clearly a coordinated attack on Vitaly Klitschko. So, Denis Shmyhal, when he took over formally, I think in the Verkhovna Rada, his role as Secretary for Defense, was critical of Kyiv's response to these missile and drone attacks that have left their energy infrastructure there buggered. And he said, look, Kharkiv is consistently getting attacked, and it deals with it better than Kyiv. What are you doing, Kyiv? You've been unprepared, type thing. And half of me thinks that is justified. Like, Kyiv is undoubtedly in huge doo-doo at the moment with regard to the energy infrastructure. I mean, the Russians have really hammered the power plants in Kyiv, and Kyiv, I think, is kind of on its knees at the moment in the context of energy. And is anyone to blame for that? Is that just Russians ramping up their use of drones and missiles, or is there an element of Kyiv not being as prepared, kind of resting on its laurels, having the best air defense, and not expecting the power systems to be so completely shellacked by the Russians that actually they weren't prepared for the eventuality of not having power, and you've now got all these residential areas in trouble. Actually, Kharkiv, so Denis Shmyhal, and it appears the president has said has done a much better job, and it gets attacked far more frequently, and with ballistic missiles you can't shoot down because they're so close to the border. So take a leaf out of Kharkiv's book, I think, is the idea here. But this could also be an unjustified attack on Klitschko for political reasons. As Tim White says, clearly a coordinated attack on Klitschko. Klitschko gave an impassioned response to the government attack. He says he had to do it publicly because Zelensky won't meet him. It's common knowledge Zelensky has tried to remove Kyiv's mayor, but it's still appalling they've not met. So Klitschko here says, what intensity in the work in Kyiv during the emergency situation does the president not see? In particular, in recent days, as he said, when after a devastating attack out of 6,000 houses without heat, about 400 remain without heat in a few days. When utility workers work around the clock, the bitter cold to repair critical infrastructure damaged by the enemy in order to return heat and water to people. When energy workers try, also working 24/7 to return light to the homes of Kyiv residents for at least a few hours. When we connect social institutions to autonomous sources, hospitals, maternity wards, homes for the elderly, psychoneurological dispensaries, social workers deliver hot food to lonely Kyiv residents lying down. When workers are on duty at heating points around the clock to receive Kyiv residents, when we power critical infrastructure facilities from generators, such statements, first of all, nullify the selfless work of thousands of people, specialists. Although they do not have weapons in their hands, they also fight for their country with their tireless efforts. So there's criticism that there needs to be a greater intensity from Kyiv to get energy back online. He's like, no, these guys are working their bollocks off. Meanwhile, continuous hate. Klitschko advised those who have the opportunity to move out of town so they don't freeze without light and heat. Those who have the opportunity to temporarily leave. At least I speak honestly and warn people about the extremely difficult situation. And I don't care about my ratings and phantom elections. And in this emergency situation, I, as a mayor, all city services are doing everything to maintain the city's vital activities, as in the first days and weeks of the full-scale war, to preserve the health and lives of the city's residents, and we will continue to do so. I'm answering you, publicly, because over the past 4 years, you and I, Mr. President, unfortunately, have never met in person, which is quite extraordinary. So I think Zelensky needs to be careful here. I know they don't get on, but he doesn't want to have a massive public spat between himself and Klitschko. They need to get together. They need to sort out their differences and work in unison with each other. I think an added challenge for Klitschko and Kyiv as a whole is that Kyiv's population has apparently grown, where Kharkiv's population has shrunk, and that gives its own kind of challenges for Kyiv as it tries to, have energy for a growing population. And tries to do things to protect them as much as possible. Right, okay, moving on. There's information that Ukrainian hackers have hacked the Russian Messenger Max. This is a new messenger app that all new phones they have this app Max preloaded onto the phones, and now they've banned, WhatsApp and Twitter and all these social media platforms. That this is a way to keep a real handle on the Russian population. It also means that the population is less able to communicate with each other, to meet up in clandestine, to meet up and protest. So part of this is keeping an iron grip on the population for anti-protest reasons. But they are able to snoop using this app Max. Well, it turns out that the Ukrainians have hacked the Max app. They report that they managed to download the data of more than 15 million users. Information about one of the State Duma deputies was published as evidence. So they publicly kind of outed this Duma deputy with data from the Max app there. Now, according to the Moscow Times, the price of Russian Urals oil has fallen below $40 a barrel for the first time in 5 years. In December, the average price of Urals was $39.18. That's 13% lower than in November and 41% lower than in January last year. The reason for the drop is the introduction of US sanctions against Rosneft and Lukoil, due to which discounts on Urals to Brent in the Black and Baltic Seas reached a record $26 to $28 per barrel. That's a discount. As a result, the average cost of Russian oil has dropped to its lowest level since May 2020, about $31 a barrel, when the global market collapsed due to the pandemic. In fact, prices have returned to the levels of the beginning of Putin's first presidential term and are almost $20 lower than the figure laid down in the Russian budget for 2026, which is $59 per barrel. So remember, the Russians wanted previous budgets were like $75 a barrel. Then they realized that they weren't getting that. Then they reduced it to $60 a barrel. And that's assuming a sort of $40 a barrel break even, that given $20 a barrel profit. Well, now they're operating at a loss. I mean, this is absolutely horrendous. And the European Union's reacted to this by reducing their ceiling price for Russian oil from $47.6, which they had only recently reduced anyway, to $44.1 a barrel from February the 1st. That is going to hurt. So this is the oil price cap. That means that the ships that transport this oil won't be insured unless they are selling oil under $44.1 a barrel. So it caps the Russians' ability to make anything more than $44.1 a barrel, which gives them only kind of $4 of profit, a real nominal profit there. So that is definitely a kick in the teeth for the Russians. I thought I had. I mean, yeah, I thought I had somewhere just a little chat about the break even. So, yeah, I mean, the break even is thought to be about $40 a barrel. And at the moment, the discounts in, as mentioned, in Urals oil is just bringing that below. They are making a loss on shifting oil, and they have to shift it because otherwise they have to close down the wells, cap the wells, and then you get frozen pipes if it's not consistently moving through the pipes. The Russian coal industry is also in trouble. It's undergoing a managed contraction, a consequence of a protracted crisis that is only getting worse. This term was coined by Russian officials. In 2026, the situation for the Russian authorities will worsen further due to sanctions and a war against Ukraine. Currently, 32 coal companies in the Kemerovo region are in the red zone, 19 of which actually stopped working. And there are issues with workers not getting paid and all sorts of issues. So the coal industry suffering. Meanwhile, we are starting to see Indian migrants working in greater numbers in Russia. They're attempting to clear snow here in Moscow. According to New Delhi's Employment Bureau, more than 70,000 Indians are already working in Russia. In 2026, Russia plans to bring in at least 40,000 more labor migrants from India. This will no doubt cause social cohesion problems as they are going to, the Russians need these people to come and work for them because they're losing so many people to the war, and this has caused a bit of a labor shortage, which then it has an inflationary pressure as they can't get people to work. So you have to attract the people that are still available to work with higher and higher wages to try and get them to come to work for you rather than going to work for someone else. So everyone's fighting over a very small pool of workers is one of the theories. So there are some contradictory claims that actually there aren't labor shortages, and that, you know, you do hear many things, but I think the end result here is that the Russian economy is in a lot of trouble. They need to bring down inflation and the cost of labor, and so importing lots of cheap labor from India is one of their options there. The question is, how many of these do end up on the front line, and how much issues of social cohesion does this bring about? Then we hear that the US has suspended visas for citizens of 75 countries, including Russia. This is fascinating for a bunch of reasons, not least a football World Cup in 2026. If they're suspending visas for 75 countries, including Russia, I mean, that's great from a Ukrainian point of view with Russia, but how are they going to cope with getting enough people to come and watch the football World Cup? I don't know. This continues a slow but general trend of the White House moving away from cooperation with Putin, says Tim White. Although the problem is, then you see today Trump coming out and saying, as I reported earlier in my video, it's Groundhog Day again, says Maria Drutska. Trump is back to claiming that Putin wants to make peace deal and Zelensky doesn't. She says, I'm guessing there was a recent phone call, but we seem to have this situation where Trump is pathologically aligned to Putin. And although he gets evidence now and again that pushes him away from supporting Putin, he's drawn inexorably back to supporting Putin, like some kind of magnetic pull that seems to be pathological. And here he is saying it's Zelensky's fault there isn't peace, but that's because Zelensky's very clearly said we can't just give up the Donbass region to the Russians. We've got our best defenses there, and they've invaded us. Why should we give up our unconquered territory to them just because you tell us to? So, yeah, and it's unconstitutional. So of course he's going to say no to that. But Trump has taken to blaming Zelensky again. I don't know. It's just really frustrating. And I love the fact that now Donald Tusk, since I made that video, has come out and said it is Russia who rejected the peace plan prepared by the US, not Zelensky. The only Russian response were further missile attacks on Ukrainian cities. This is why the only solution is to strengthen pressure on Russia, and you all know it. Now, I really would hope that Trump showed this kind of communication, but I don't know that he is. I really hope that he sees the opinions from people that actually know it's Russia that is to blame. But anyway, and then we hear that a UK diplomat has been expelled. So Russia's expelled a diplomat accused of working for an intelligence agency and summoned Danai Dolakia to protest. While she was inside, fake protesters were hired to harangue her as she tried to leave. Look at the appalling intimidation, says Tim White, of the UK chargé d'affaires in Moscow. Just absolutely incredible here. You can't hear all the chanting here, but there is all this chanting as these British diplomats are, given a hard time, being kicked out of the embassy there. But yeah, these are paid up pro-Russian stooges giving that Brits a particularly hard time. Anyway, that's enough from me. I appreciate your support. Thank you so much. Sorry it's a later one today than usual, and hope to speak to you a little bit later as well.